and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, Michael Sidgwick, and Benjamin Richardson here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views, we have interviews, more roundtable discussions like this one, and a round of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael and Benjamin to talk about regrets. We've all had them. But today I want to talk about
I'm having one right now.
WWE Regrets in 2019. It's been a up and down year, let's say, for the biggest wrestling company in the world. Michael Sidgwick, when I say to you biggest WWE regrets of 2019, what automatically springs to mind?
2019. I mean, it's been...
I regret the year existing, entering the calendar rolling over.
It's been a total disaster. A total disaster of a year. And the thing is, like, it's hard to say they'll regret anything because, in theory, they did a lot of things that fans have been crying out for that they just never really materialised.
And not only that, but when have WWE ever regretted anything? The probably the most bullish, stubborn man in the world in charge of that company. If they regretted anything, changes would have occurred long ago.
Let's just pretend, for the sake of the podcast,
yes,
that there's some kind of self-awareness or atonement on the part of Vince McMahon.
Well, there'll certainly be regrets elsewhere within that company, for sure. Like some of Vince McMahon's direct subordinates, in particular, will have some very specific regrets.
You know what my funniest favourite regret is? At the Hall of Fame ceremony, Triple H referred to AEW as a piss and company, and then months later they beat his vanity project in the ratings. Like, that's just, you hate to see it. But on a more serious note, it's got to be Hell in a Cell, hasn't it not?
Yeah, I mean, there's been various issues throughout the year, I think it's fair to say, but the sort of microcosm of everything that is wrong with WWE can be summed up in what on earth they decided to do for the second year running, ending Hell in a Cell with an inconclusive finish and simultaneously ruining the match concept, completely finishing off Seth Rollins and destroying the Fiend character, arguably, as well.
Yeah, I think the problem with Hell in a Cell and the reason why it's become such a lightning rod, we are going to get so sick in the coming years of talking about this, much in the same way as I dread writing about the Montreal Screwjob. I dread writing about the Summer of Punk. This match was such a disaster and so illustrative on a micro level of WWE's macro problems that it can only be the biggest regret of the year because they didn't just destroy one character. They destroyed the one character that fans actually clung to amid all of these regrets in this awful year of terrible creative product. This one character was the WWE fans' way of trying to engage with a product, trying to believe that it's capable of producing stars and really interesting ideas all over again. And the fact that they killed it on his second pay-per-view appearance in such farcical, comical fashion, I mean, it broke you.
It did break me for a variety of reasons. The foremost being, they didn't need to book him into the title picture against Seth Rollins. You could quite easily have had Bray Wyatt, The Fiend, in some sort of Hell in a Cell match against literally anyone other than the champion. He can go over. You don't have to do some backwards finish. You can protect Seth Rollins in there, have some sort of showcase performance, and eventually build to The Fiend challenging for that championship, as opposed to what they decided to do.
And it's difficult to even know what we were hoping to get out of this. Like, what did they get out of it? Maybe increase the ticket sales for Hell in a Cell? But like in the long term, absolutely no good has come of it. What was the actual plan? I'm still not sure to this day. Now, you could roll it back a bit and maybe argue that perhaps WWE, one of the bigger regrets might have been going full on with Seth Rollins to begin with, because he's proven to be, quite frankly, just not up to the job as their top champion. I know he's obviously not now, but it's a lot of their failings have been represented by his inability to be the champion figure, and I think that really came ahead at Hell in a Cell 2019.
And then the subsequent fallout from it all.
Yeah, and the way it's arguably got even worse.
Yeah, and I suppose that couples into one of the ones that I wanted to mention, and that was the way that they booked not only Seth around sort of Hell in a Cell, but Seth with Baron Corbin and Lacey Evans being involved in all that, and then utilizing the fact that Seth and Becky are together, just really muddied the waters a little bit too much for me.
Yeah, the thing about Seth Rollins is that they kind of answered a long-held fan complaint, because Seth Rollins, not to an exceptional level, but Seth Rollins was kind of a platonic ideal for a lot of hardcore fans in that he was a technically very good pro wrestler. He was always been pushed and profiled, but he's never been considered the tippy-toppy guy, and they've never really went with a performer of his ilk as the tippy-top guy. They went with him. They put him over twice against Brock Lesnar. They asked him to lead the brand, and it was a complete and emphatic failure. And I think the very fact that it failed told a lot of WWE fans that it kind of doesn't matter what you want. It never used to matter because it never gave you what you want. And even if they can give you what they want, and it's the same thing with Kofi Kingston, they can't execute what you want.
And I think that's precisely the point, because knowing how spiteful WWE can be as well, they'll almost certainly regret actually listening to the fans on these in those two examples, and, as you said, giving them what they wanted, because neither one of them worked out how fans would have liked. Or I mean, Kofi Kingston's a different matter. He could have been booked a lot better. But Seth Rollins, I do feel like they did everything in their power to make that work, and it just didn't come off. He just wasn't the right guy, and they didn't think he was the right guy until everybody told him he is the right guy. Give us what we want. And then they did.
I still remember leaving WrestleMania 35, just my jaw on the floor. I said, this is one of the best WrestleManias I've ever seen, which is a little bit hyperbolic, but when, first one I'd ever been to, etc., etc. And I can't remember who it was. I have a feeling it was Adam Nicholas, who just turned to me and said, yeah, but if we get all that, you got the three big things, of course, Becky, Seth, and Kofi winning the titles. And it's like, they've given you everything you want here. They're going to want something back now as a result. Or, like we said, they're not going to be able to handle it well. And that turned out to be the case. Benjamin Richardson, what are some of your WWE regrets for 2019?
I greatly regret the way they reintroduced Roman Reigns after his leukemia went into remission. I thought it was one of the best moments that's happened, not just in WWE, but in wrestling in years. And it was a genuinely emotional human interest story. It transcended anything they were doing, what they were writing. It was nothing to do with them. They could have had him come back as a hero. Instead, they had him emerge on television and start a program with Drew McIntyre, and that resulted in a match at WrestleMania that he didn't seem ready for, that the fans were not interested in. There was still unbelievably a smattering of boos in that match, and it just felt like it's such a waste. Now, I don't necessarily think you should always be looking to profit from a real life situation, or to exploit it. But on that occasion, I don't think anyone would have minded. They wanted Roman Reigns to make this big comeback, and it was just squandered just for the sake of getting him on the card.
You've used the words human interest story.
Yep.
WWE are now doing dog stuff.
Yes.
Human interest story, and now they're doing dog stuff.
Well, this is exactly it. Look where he is now. Look, this time last year, we didn't know if Roman Reigns would ever wrestle again. Quite honestly, we didn't know if his life would ever be the same again. There was a possibility, albeit low, that he could have been seriously ill, even passed away. He's now back, and it's just normality. It's not even normality, it's mundane that he's part of a company, and the program he's in is to the interest of nobody. It's unbelievable what they've done with that character.
That is precisely the word. I don't know how they conspire to do this, to normalise everyone and everything. It's just the most bizarre thing, and it just speaks to the sheer institutional rot coursing through that company.
Yeah, on the other hand side of things, the one man who they actually managed to lionise this year was the departing Dean Ambrose, who they gave the biggest send-off possible, because apparently we were entirely hoodwinked into believing that was it. He was taking a sabbatical from the industry. So they said, fine, yeah, we'll make the most out of this, make a bit of money out of this. And then hilariously, second his contract winds down, Moxley returns, and we all know what's happened since then. So I don't personally regret it, because I think it was hilarious. But I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of heads may have rolled, but there'll be a lot of angry people in the boardroom.
Well, it was so convincing. Some people even thought that him leaving WWE was a work, but let's move swiftly past that.
It was idiotic, because imagine them doing something so sophisticated in the back of your mind, well, the front of your mind, your eyes are actually watching Monday Night Raw at the same time. Adam Wilborn, I do not know how you did this to yourself.
You were so disappointed in me.
Oh God, I still am, profoundly so. The thing that the Moxley thing's probably a massive regret because it brought into focus the hilarious but very unenviable fact that the second you get out of that company is the second you get over and become the most interesting version of yourself.
It also demonstrated their infrastructural misunderstanding of the talent they have at their disposal. You know, it's like they didn't even know what he planned to do next and couldn't have predicted it.
You know what's funny? They could have predicted it because if you watched the...
But they couldn't because they're not competent enough to do so.
Yeah, I know, but if they were competent, right, if you watched that Dean Ambrose Chronicle, right, you're clearly watching a man...
I've watched it about 5 times.
Clearly watching a man who is kind of distressed at his situation and really dissatisfied. I believe it started near enough with footage of his comeback, and he's just saying, right, that what makes him happy, not the bollocks props or the lame comedy... He's training for his comeback, and he just very earnestly says, I just love to grapple. I just love to wrestle and be in this ring and grapple without all the bollocks. And they just give him all the bollocks.
Yep. They gave him more bollocks.
How could they have watched, produced, made that special and thought, oh yeah, he wants to retire. He didn't want to retire, clearly. He might have alluded to this to clear his path, but... He just wanted to grapple, wrestle.
That's down to the regular discordance between those specials and WWE's weekly television. But they might as well be exist in a different universe.
Exactly. It was completely two different parties. It was the left hand and the right hand existing completely separately from each other. Because I remember us having this conversation of if any of WWE's writers for Monday Night Raw watched 5 minutes of that, there's your character right there. You don't need any more, even the turn that they had, obviously subsequent to the Roman Reigns announcement, and we were so excited at that time. It was terrible news and horrible sort of packaging of everything together. But it was a lightning rod, and then they had him come out in a gas mask and get injections and say people smell, and it was just like, oh, you've dropped the ball, on the 1 yard line and you've dropped the ball.
That Chronicle was one of the first in that series where they actually tried to weave in an element of the narrative into what's usually just like a behind the curtain peer at a superstar's life. And I've been disinterested in Dean Ambrose for the longest time. I think most of us were. We didn't want to see him again. And after I watched that, I thought, I understand, for the first time, I understand his character, his motivations. I'm excited to see where it goes. This is subtle, good stuff. This is a real... fully fleshed out, three-dimensional character, and like you say, it might as well have never happened.
And do you think as well as that, it wasn't just the fact that he left WWE, it's the fact he literally paved the way to go to the opposition, because it would have been all well and good if AEW was launched with, with Cody and with Kenny Omega and even with Chris Jericho, because they weren't transitioning from WWE immediately, whereas Moxley walked that path and said to anyone within the WWE, if you can get out, it's right here. And we've seen people, arguably, that no offense to them, arguably they aren't even that bothered about seeing an AEW, but they're thinking, well, it can't be any worse than here.
Not only that, he's proved that you can be a million times better. Him and Jake Hager and Sean Spears, to some extent, have all shown that they can be far greater, even if they're not necessarily the superstar, than what were in WWE.
I still remember you raving about him in New Japan as well, of course.
Oh my God, it was absolutely wonderful. He is the Pied Piper, and that is their biggest regret of the year. It has to be.
Yep.
Even if it doesn't all materialise this year, he has changed the narrative, and if you forgive the wordplay, he's changed the paradigm. His New Japan run, even more so than the AEW stuff for me, has illustrated everything that he did. He just did the opposite of what he did in WWE, and it was actually amazing. His backstage promos after his matches with Shota Umino were just so funny and so great and so off the cuff and so magnetic. His matches, he arrived in every single building from a different route. He would never be allowed to do that in WWE. They always have to come down the ramp. I know obviously he didn't, but he was the exception. Do the pose to the exact millisecond. In the New Japan G1 Climax, he had a match with Tetsuya Naito. The sort of match that could never happen in WWE because so much of it was based on the very entrance. Moxley made his entrance as normal. Tetsuya Naito took 5 minutes to get to the ring. That would never happen in WWE, but it informed the story. Jon Moxley's whole thing was he needed to keep his cool because Tetsuya Naito's aloof quality was going to piss him off into a rash mistake. And he kept his cool and overcame after Tetsuya Naito had like 3 T-shirts on that he was taking off. It was really funny. It was really creative. And what I'm getting at is even something as subtle as an entrance in New Japan can inform a story. In WWE, it's the same old story. Jon Moxley proved definitively that storytelling could be done significantly better outside of WWE.
Meanwhile, to bring it to another regret of WWE's in 2019, Shane McMahon was the best in the world, was crowned the best in the world towards the end of last year? It all sort of merging together.
Crown Jewel.
Yeah, he followed that up in 2019 with turning heel, facing The Miz at WrestleMania, and then everything that came with that, and just being featured not just on the one brand he was on, but on Raw as well, and dominating TV and go away heat.
Yeah, the thing is, and I don't want to warp this, it was quite fabulous up to and including WrestleMania, if you like Daft Bollocks, and it was the best possible match they could have had. It was the only possible good match they could have had, and then it just went to a WWE finish, prolonged the feud. It was ultimately meant to get Shane McMahon over as a heel, and it was just a complete load of regurgitated crap, wasn't it? I mean, what did it accomplish? Ultimately, if you trace that storyline from inception to conclusion, I don't know if this was the plan all along, but it strove to get ultimately Kevin Owens over. He was more over at the start of that feud with Shane McMahon than the end.
Absolutely. By the end, when he was begging for fines to be reduced, etc., and offering handshakes, it cut the legs out completely from underneath him.
Pathetic and horribly telling adaptation of the very real power dynamics in play in that company.
Yeah, but again, I don't think they'll regret it.
Any more regrets?
Don't ruin the point.
What other regrets have you got?
The the Super Showdown main event, Goldberg and The Undertaker.
I'm so glad someone mentioned that.
That was a regret. I'm pretty sure The Undertaker regrets that, and he absolutely did because he powered back with an astonishing comeback.
Graveyard Dogs.
Goldberg.
Love them, man.
Goldberg himself has basically wanted, if you watched his recent chronicle, it was all under the surface, but he was basically saying, I wasn't satisfied with this. I don't want this to be my ending. I've got more in store. And he wasn't talking about Dolph Ziggler, incidentally. So
see, they did regret this, and they tried to atone for it.
Yes.
But only when it comes to the established legend stars who can make the money in Saudi Arabia. They couldn't give a toss about the full-time roster. No regrets.
Yeah, because the established legendary stars said this was abysmal. I want another go, otherwise I'm not coming back. And they said, oh yeah, absolutely, Mr. Undertaker.
That in itself is yet again illustrative of profound inherent problems in that company.
Still, though, what a knee bar, bro. Let's move on to the final one we need to mention here. I'm sure we could go on and on and on.
Do the impression.
It has to be the wild card rule.
Yeah, what a load of crap. What an absolute load of bollocks. I was on holiday when this happened.
Just, sorry, before we get on to the wild card rule, something very similar. Do you think they maybe regret the way they did the draft on Fox recently?
Yeah, unquestionably, with a robot celebrating.
The robot celebration I liked. It was the robot doing the draft on the podium I didn't like. I mean...
But you had that little dig at Elias.
Yeah.
Peach.
What a great... I wouldn't go that far, but what a great opportunity.
What
a great opportunity to prove to people, like, this is a new SmackDown. This is something brilliant. It's worth tuning in. We had all our big legends last week for our big buy. Come and see the fresh new stratosphere of SmackDown. But no, it's just Stephanie McMahon standing there, reading out names for 2 hours. Ridiculous, bad. Just the same old nonsense as the wildcard rule that you're about to get onto.
I was on holiday when the wildcard rule was implemented. Waking up in the beautiful sun of Crete.
Ooh,
ready to just have my paid-for breakfast. Yep. All of it. All you can eat. Then I was going to go to the pool, have a lovely daytime nap. And then I was going to eat some fresh fish on a nighttime.
Wait, was this Agnes Nicholas?
Yes.
Yes.
With ice-cold mythos. Just what a beautiful place and a beautiful time. Then I read about the wildcard on Twitter, then I had to watch the YouTube clips, and I got pissed off beyond belief. So pissed off because at the end of the day, they've got such a vast, ridiculously vast, never been as loaded roster. and they just minimized like 90% of them to overexpose the 10% that you meant to like the most. That's why they were on the wildcard rule shows, and you just kind of resented their presence because they were overbearing. I was having a conniption fit when I was watching this. Like, conniption
Can I tell you,
fits.
if you want to avoid apoplexia on your holidays, don't read about WWE. Just have a week.
I'm obsessed with Twitter, man.
I know, but just have a week where you turn it off because you can't affect it. You can't write about it. You can't analyze it. It's happening. Just let it happen and then come back to it all. And you think, I went on holiday. I came back. I went to Korea for the 2.5 weeks. When I came back, I read the news. Oh, Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff are now back. And I thought, hang on, have I gone back in time? Is that what happened? Yeah, I know it's like, it was, I don't know, it was like an 8-hour time difference. It was like a 20-year time difference. It was ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, do I regret it? Yeah, probably. It was desperation. It's been a year of desperation, and that was
Desperation, retcons, reboots.
Yeah.
the wildcard rule was so baffling.
I'm a genius.
Well, they even published an article on the website titled "What is the wildcard rule?" and even
Changed
their
on the same program.
No,
Just
even
the shrugging
even their
emoji.
staffers struggled. It was. Yeah,
It was
emblematic.
I was going to say,
a year of problems.
if you're talking about, desperation, a rule they came up with, I don't know, probably what's the show. I mean, we should mention the amount of times that Raw started and the script hadn't been finished for the show, which was insane.
Yeah, 4 minutes into Raw.
Yeah.
I was gonna mention the recent chaos in Saudi Arabia might have been a regret, but it turned out to be the best thing that could ever happen. It got the highest SmackDown rating since the move to Fox. They had the best show, and it was because they couldn't do any of the rubbish that they wanted to do to begin with.
Indeed. Yeah, the wildcard rule's mad because it was, like you say, it was just, we need something to explain why these distinct brands are now just crossing over into each other. You reduce the time for the stars that are exclusive to those brands. You just showcase your, and I've got no problem with Roman Reigns or AJ Styles, but them being featured across everything was overkill for me. And yeah, there's not even a rule as to whether it's 4 people. Does that 4 people include a tag team as 1 person, as 2 people? Half the time there'd be 6 people. Well, honestly, I remember doing the news with Andy, and daily it would just be, yeah, they broke the wildcard rule again last night. It was like, okay, it's not 4 people, it's 5 people. Right. Okay, now it's 6 people. It was just, there was no hard and fast rule. It made no sense. It was just...
And it was called the wildcard rule. It was a rule.
And then their house show suffered as well as a result of it, because they'd have to pull people from house shows and then sometimes cancel house shows because they didn't have anyone there because they needed them for the TV.
Well, I have wondered latterly if this wasn't just an elaborate scheme to cancel those house shows
indeed.
that were selling badly so they could fudge for figures on the investor callings, which, fair play, it's ingenious, but it didn't help the product overall and certainly wouldn't have helped house shows going forward.
Finally, one of the biggest regrets I think WWE will have
Here we go.
all round is Stomping Grounds.
Oh, I was like smelling a bit.
Oh, there is a bit coming.
I thought you were going to say taking the titles off the Iconics.
Yeah, I was exactly.
Well, that did reduce the quality of...
Goes without saying.
Yeah, obviously. But you had Stomping Grounds, which was just all round a dreadful pay-per-view, personified by the fact, who was the face of Stomping Grounds? Roman Reigns. The guy
your favourite bit.
The guy who uses a fist instead of the guy who's there as Universal Champion, whose finisher is called the curb stomp.
Just for one night, he could have been the big clog. Good, eh?
Let us know your thoughts on your biggest WWE regrets of 2019 in the comment section
Burn it
below.
ground.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Watch there, follow all 3 of us. You can follow Michael Sidgwick at
Sidgwick.
You can follow Benjamin Richardson at
BAR3 unless I'm on holiday.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow us all at WhatCultureWWE, as I said. My thanks to Benjamin and to Michael. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.